The wind rolls off the Alaskan mountains like a slow warning, rattling loose boards on an old cabin where a familiar face now sits alone. Years have passed since cameras followed every hunt, storm, and quiet family moment. But today, the silence feels different. For the first time, one of the men who lived it is ready to explain why Alaska, the last frontier, disappeared from television without a dramatic finale. What happened behind the scenes wasn't scandal. It was something far more human. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more stories they never showed on TV. When Alaska, the Last Frontier first aired, the producers promised just one thing: honesty. They wanted to document a way of life that was vanishing with every passing winter. For the first 2 seasons, it worked. The cameras stayed back, capturing quiet mornings, long hunts, and the slow thaw of spring. Fans loved the pacing because it felt real. But the moment ratings climbed, the quiet changed. Suddenly, network executives were visiting the Homestead with clipboards, asking questions that didn't fit the wilderness. Can we get more conflict? One asked. Maybe a dangerous scene. Something intense, suggested another. To most viewers, the show still looked peaceful. Behind the lens, however, conversations were shifting from survival to storytelling. Producers began encouraging reshoots. If a fence fell unexpectedly, they'd ask the family to react again for better angles. A harmless disagreement over livestock was framed as a brewing feud. At first, the Kilcher family complied, respectfully, patiently. But the subtle rewrites of their lives left a sour taste. They weren't actors. They were Alaskans, raised on truth, not performance. As weeks turned into months, producers pushed deeper. They wanted more danger during hunts, closer camera angles near charging animals, and staged disagreements when the real ones didn't spark hard enough. In the editing rooms down south, storylines twisted. A simple mechanical breakdown became a dramatic cliffhanger. Tense music turned quiet moments into looming disasters. Fans saw drama. The Kilchers saw distortion. Off-camera, exhaustion began creeping in like frost under a cabin door. Crew members clocked long days in bitter cold. Equipment froze, tempers shortened, and the family's patience thinned. Conversations began happening in whispers. This doesn't feel right anymore. Children who once excitedly waved at the cameras now hid behind door frames. Elders took longer walks in silence. Even simple dinners felt heavy with the knowledge that someone, somewhere, would eventually shape them into plot points. For the first time, the family questioned the cost of sharing their world, because what the network didn't understand was this: the frontier isn't dramatic by design. It's quiet, it's hard, it's sacred. And something sacred was quietly being chipped away. In the early seasons, the cameras felt like friendly observers, silent guests documenting life on the homestead. But with every ratings spike, Discovery's expectations swelled. What began as a documentary slowly mutated into something else. Meetings shifted from simple check-ins to strategy sessions filled with phrases the Kilcher family had never heard before. Narrative arc, emotional beats, heightened stakes. Those words might work in boardrooms, but in Alaska they stick out like neon signs in a snowstorm. At first, the changes were small. Producers asked the family to repeat a task because a camera battery died. A hunt was filmed twice to get better angles. Harmless enough, but repetition chips at reality. What once felt authentic now felt rehearsed. Viewers at home didn't notice. The edits were clean, the music stirring, but the family felt an invisible line move beneath their feet. By season 5, production schedules swelled far beyond the original agreement. The crew arrived earlier, stayed later, and wanted coverage of nearly everything: breakfasts, bedtime discussions, and arguments that would have disappeared in 5 minutes if not for microphones hovering above mugs of coffee. The homestead's silence, so essential to survival, was replaced by generators, drones, and whispered producer directions. The crew members themselves weren't villains. Many admired the family and worked hard in brutal conditions, but they served a machine fueled by tension, not tranquility. Executives watched from cities thousands of miles away and called for more danger: wilder storms, riskier hunts, closer shots of bear encounters. Quiet weeks didn't fit the spreadsheet. Real life, however, doesn't follow a list of bullet points. Over time, something subtle happened. The Kilchers stopped behaving naturally when cameras appeared. They cleaned more, spoke less, avoided conflict, or exaggerated it. Moments that once belonged to them were shaped for television. A simple fence repair became a multi-day storyline. A minor mishap was edited into a near catastrophe. And slowly, the Homestead developed two versions of itself, the one lived and the one recorded. That fracture, small at first, would only grow with every episode. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic explosion or a shouting match. It arrived quietly, like frost creeping across a window pane. One morning, a field producer approached Atz with an innocent request. Could he hold off on fixing a damaged corral fence until the cameras arrived in 2 days? It was the first time anyone had ever asked him to delay real work for the sake of filmed work. He nodded politely, but when he walked away, the request clung to his mind like wet snow. That fence wasn't just wood. It kept his livestock safe. Waiting even a day meant predators, weather, loss. For television, it meant better timing. Soon, similar suggestions followed. A firewood shortage was highlighted for tension, even though stacks of dry logs sat just off camera. A harsh food winter was dramatized, while jars of preserved salmon lined an unfilmed pantry. Arguments that had already cooled were reignited under studio lights with a gentle nudge. Can you two talk about that disagreement again? But maybe with more energy? No one lied, but truth became curated. Fans noticed something was off. Online forums dissected footage frame by frame. Why did Atz look tired? Why did the family seem distant, distracted, hollow at the edges? Viewers praised the show's authenticity while unknowingly applauding the slow erosion of it. That pressure didn't just aim at storylines, it aimed at relationships. Family disagreements, once resolved over tea at the kitchen table, now simmered under the weight of episode outlines. Someone bumping a schedule by an hour meant reshoots, frustration, tension. Children who once ran freely now avoided the yard when cameras were outside. Privacy became a memory. Atz watched as subtle changes compounded into something larger. Crew members quietly muttered that production notes demanded urgency, stakes, and conflict. Alaska was already dangerous, but now danger was engineered. A simple river crossing became a dramatic sequence with multiple camera angles and slow-motion inserts. A stubborn tractor repair needed more frustration. Directors asked the family to repeat stressful reactions they'd already lived. The wilderness didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage. The moment that broke him wasn't dramatic. During filming, a producer asked if he could pretend to run low on food, suggesting they hide extra supplies out of frame for continuity. Atz paused. In Alaska, food isn't a prop, it's survival. That request blurred the last clear boundary between life and entertainment. That night, staring into the embers of his wood stove, he realized something crucial. The show wasn't documenting his story anymore. It was bending it. And once truth bends, it never fully straightens again. Alaska has a way of measuring a person. Some people bend with the wind, others break under it. As the seasons rolled on, the Kilcher family found themselves bending in ways they never expected. The cameras didn't just film their work, they filmed their moods, their exhaustion, and their frayed tempers. What viewers interpreted as simple drama was often the residue of sleepless nights, endless reshoots, and the subtle feeling of being watched in their own homes. Eve, juggling motherhood and homestead duties, found private moments becoming rare. A quiet cup of coffee on the porch became a mic check. A toddler tantrum became a potential episode beat. Parents everywhere know the weight of raising children. Imagine doing it with boom poles hovering overhead. The pressure didn't explode. It seeped like cold creeping through badly sealed windows. Otto's health issues added another layer nobody expected. Camera crews tried to respectfully film hospital visits and recovery updates, but the family felt those intimate moments stretching too thin. Should a father's pain be edited into a cliffhanger? Should injury become entertainment? Atz struggled to reconcile the audience's hunger for updates with his instinct to protect those he loved. And then there were the neighbors, Alaska locals who never asked to become background characters. Some were filmed chopping wood or passing through, only to return home and find strangers online analyzing their clothing, cabins, or expressing impressions. Privacy eroded like riverbanks in thaw. The mental toll was invisible, but heavy. Some family members found themselves unable to relax around each other without wondering how a comment might sound if clipped into a dramatic montage. A simple disagreement about fence placement could echo as a storyline across an entire season. Small cracks in relationships widened when replayed on television and debated by hundreds of thousands of people who had never set foot in Alaska. Atz noticed how quiet dinners had become. Conversations shortened, jokes dulled. People retreated into silence, not out of anger, but out of fear that anything spoken might later be replayed, dissected, captioned, memed. Meanwhile, the network's expectations hardened. Story producers gently steered conversations toward conflict. When the family resisted, new pressure arrived. If not this, then what's interesting? That sentence struck at the heart of their life. The simple, slow, patient rhythm of the frontier, the thing fans adored, was no longer enough. The homestead, once a refuge from the world, was becoming the world's window. And when the place you run to for peace becomes the source of stress, something fundamental breaks. Privately, Atz began to wonder if the cameras were preserving their legacy or quietly erasing the life that gave birth to it. As the show's audience grew, something else grew quietly behind the scenes. Contracts. Early agreements were simple, almost friendly, but by season 7, Discovery's legal documents thickened like winter ice. Clauses expanded, renewal terms stretched longer, and buried deep in the paperwork were stipulations about likeness rights, narrative control, and exclusive filming windows. Once signed, they meant something simple and terrifying. The family couldn't appear in any other project that showed their real lives without network approval. Their identity became part of the brand. No one talked about that on screen. Financially, fans assumed the Kilchers were earning fortunes. Alaska, the last frontier, was broadcast worldwide. Millions watched, sponsors hovered. But the reality of reality TV pay is rarely glamorous. Networks control production budgets first, then marketing, then licensing. Cast members receive only a small percentage, and even then, it often funnels back into maintaining the homestead that viewers think is free to run. Repairs, fuel, livestock feed, equipment, none of it is cheap. Meanwhile, Discovery executives rotated as frequently as seasons. Each new face brought a new vision. One wanted more emotional story arcs. Another pushed for gritty survival. Another suggested focusing on younger cast members, fresher faces, bigger demographic appeal. Quietly, whispers of format refresh drifted through headset radios. The Kilchers felt it in subtle ways. Scenes focusing on Atz were shortened. Conversations with older family members were trimmed in editing. Meetings included words like evolving audience and broader appeal. In television, broader often means younger. That's when the budget debate began. Producers tried to cut filming days to save money. Crews rushed, staging some activities to fit daylight. The family's safety concerns began clashing with deadlines. Crossing a river during thaw season might look dramatic, but it could kill someone in seconds. Atz raised objections gently. He knew the land's moods, but those concerns rarely translated well over conference calls with executives who had never felt their eyelashes freeze. Then came marketing. Promotional materials highlighted danger more than lifestyle. Trailers emphasized conflict over craftsmanship. The quiet philosophy of frontier living, the soul of the series, was replaced with fast cuts and drum beats. Online, fans argued about whether the show was becoming fake. Ironically, their criticism stemmed from something the family never wanted to do in the first place. But ratings charts don't care about philosophy. They care about spikes. Meanwhile, sponsorship deals appeared. Clothing, knives, gear. Some were legitimate tools the family used. Others were staged placements imposed by advertisers. Atz hated holding something on camera that he didn't actually believe in. He refused quietly, politely. And for the first time, emails from the network stopped using cheerful exclamation marks. Response times slowed. Suggestions became directives. The warm partnership cooled into business. One night, after a long day of filming, Atz sat by the wood stove with the contract packet spread across the table. Flames flickered against pages of legal language drafted thousands of miles miles away. He traced his finger over the clauses that gave the network control of footage forever. He realized something unsettling. The show no longer belonged to his family, their image, their memories, their most vulnerable moments, all licensed permanently. Out there, somewhere, raw footage of their lives sat on servers owned by strangers. And in that realization, he felt the first spark of resolve. Some stories aren't meant to be purchased. Some lives aren't meant to be packaged. The Homestead wasn't built under contractual terms, and it wouldn't die under them either. That seed of defiance would grow into the decision viewers still question today. Alaska doesn't care about storylines, and eventually, the land reminded everyone who was in charge. One afternoon, while filming a routine project, a sudden gust slammed down from the ridge. A cameraman lost his footing on slick boards, and Otto rushed forward instinctively. In the scramble, he wrenched his back hard enough to drop to a knee. For the family, the moment was terrifying. For some crew, it was an angle. Cameras hovered while he winced, their lenses capturing pain that had nothing to do with entertainment. Atz didn't say anything then, but the sight of a camera lingering on his brother's struggle sank into him like cold water. Weeks later, a request arrived to shoot near a ravine softened by days of rain. At night, bears had been active, and the earth crumbled beneath boots. Atz refused immediately. It wasn't a debate. You don't gamble with unstable ground when you live in a place where mistakes are permanent. The refusal frustrated production. If there's no risk, a producer whispered, there's no excitement. Atz stared, realizing that danger wasn't just documented anymore. It was expected. Small red flags multiplied. A drone startled livestock, sending them into a panicked sprint. Someone suggested staging equipment failures to sell struggle. Mild disagreements were nudged into on-camera confrontations. A quiet sigh, caught by a mic, turned into a dramatic score in the edit. Life was being edited into something it wasn't. Privately, fatigue spread through the family. Otto's recovery was slow, and every day on camera felt heavier. Crew members battled frostbite and exhaustion. The land was teaching the same lesson it always had: survive by respecting boundaries. But television didn't respect boundaries. It blurred them. Then came the moment Atz couldn't shake. During a review session, he watched an edited sequence where a simple, tired comment from his son was cut into a dramatic breakdown. Music swelled. Tension was invented. It felt like a stranger had rewritten their lives. After that, Atz noticed something subtle. His interview segments shortened. Narration lines shifted elsewhere. Scenes where he refused risk quietly disappeared. Control, once shared, now tilted toward rooms full of people who had never felt Alaskan winter on their skin. And in that quiet shift, he understood something chilling. They weren't documenting survival anymore. They were manufacturing it. The cracks finally became impossible to ignore when small moments meant to be private, began showing up in rough cuts. A quiet conversation about medical worries, a whispered fear about finances, even a tearful pause while tending animals after a sleepless night. None of it was meant for millions of strangers. When the family pushed back, producers responded with phrases like, "It's powerful," and "audiences will connect to this." To Atz, it sounded like one thing: vulnerability packaged as product. Filming days grew longer, sometimes stretching until the moon crested the mountains. Children were handed microphones before breakfast. Privacy vanished like footprints in falling snow. Even celebrations, birthdays, milestones, quiet triumphs were scheduled around camera crews. The spontaneity that once defined frontier life was now bound to call sheets and battery charges. The emotional toll surfaced at the dinner table. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when someone saw a blinking red camera light. Opinions softened into generic agreement to avoid becoming the dramatic one. When family members have to calculate authenticity, something sacred is already gone. Then Discovery executives scheduled a pivotal meeting. Their proposal: more conflict, younger focus, higher stakes. They wanted casting adjustments, new personalities, altered dynamics. It wasn't malicious, it was business. But for the Kilchers, it felt like strangers redesigning their lives. After the meeting, silence settled over the homestead thicker than fog. No one spoke for nearly an hour. The family didn't need words. They all felt the same pressure. Finally, Atz broke the hush with a single line: "This isn't who we are." Heads nodded around the table. That moment was the closest thing to a vote the homestead had had ever taken. As the final episodes filmed, viewers saw normal smiles. What they didn't see were the private hand squeezes, the relieved glances when cameras powered down, the weight slowly lifting. Crew members sensed it too. Some hugged the family extra tight on the last day. A few whispered, "I get it." When the trucks rumbled down the gravel path and the valley returned to stillness, something happened that never made it to broadcast. The family stepped outside and listened. No generators, no drones, no radios. Just wind, snow, wood creaking in the cold. That sound, silence, is what they had been fighting for all along, and it was finally theirs again. When Atz finally spoke publicly about the show's ending, his explanation wasn't dramatic. It was honest. He said a story can only stay true as long as the people living it feel free. Once cameras began shaping decisions, the frontier spirit faded. He'd rather end something he loved than watch it slowly become unrecognizable. Today, he still lives in the same valley, still tends the same land, but with privacy restored. Fans might miss the weekly episodes, but the homestead breathes again. That was always the point: survival with dignity. When asked if he'd return, Atz smiled and said, "Some chapters close so others can finally begin." What do you think? Was walking away the right choice before the wilderness became an act? Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories most shows never tell.